Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Dr. Hina Kazmi. She is a professor at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kazmi.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I'm really happy to be here.
So we met probably in May, and I am intrigued by a new course that you are rolling out this month in August for the Schar School called Introduction to Space Policy. And this is a very unique idea to be in the Schar School of Policy and Government.
Yes.
But give us a little bit of background as to why this school, why this program, why this course?
Why this course? Great question to start. So we, as humanity, really are in the midst of a new space age. Some people call it a space age 2.0, since the dawn of the space age some almost 70 years ago. And what is different about this resurgence of space age is that it is primarily a commercial space age. So there are two primary reasons we need to talk about policy now. Is the economic potentials and what we call the space ecosystem, and again, talking about going back human space exploration. So we haven't returned to the moon since the 1970s, but that is what we talk about, and we'll get into the details of that today later. So going human space travel, space exploration, space ecosystem overall, it is just exciting times. Almost every day you can guaranteed to get some news about either Starlink satellites being launched or some new technology that we on a daily basis rely on, and that is driven by and based on satellite-based technologies. So it is really very much satellites and space technology are very much part of our daily lives. I have been affiliated with the George Mason and the Schar School of Policy and Government for a number of years. I did my MPP and my PhD at Schar. So this long affiliation, being inside the Beltway, it was an obvious choice to come, and I approached Dean Rozelle. So many kudos to Dean Rozelle and the Schar School that I made a proposal to them that we really need to talk about space policy, because there's so much going on, it's happening so fast, and that Schar is the right place that we really start talking about just the multiple layers, policy layers that we can get into related to space ecosystem.
So you have a very unique background because when you think about space, people are talking about aerospace engineering, for instance, or when you talk about the economic potential, you're talking about something that may be the purview of the business school. But you actually have a background in many things. So your journey from being a student yourself, like a middle school student yourself, and an interest in space that goes back a long time, to all of the degree programs you yourself have been through, have led you to this. So help us understand a little bit, going back to middle school, all the things you have done that brought you here.
Okay, so yes, I knew very early in my life that I was just naturally drawn to the space sciences, the solar system, just the cosmos. I was naturally drawn to it as early as when I was 10 years old. I was aware of Carl Sagan's, and this was Carl Sagan's time. Voyager 1 was launched, and we started receiving, for the first time, humans started seeing really up close images of the planets in our solar system. It was fascinating. So yes, I've been a space geek from childhood, and mathematically, thankfully, I was inclined in mathematics. I was good in it, so I went into engineering, and I did my aerospace engineering, and a very proud alumni of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I was there so long ago that at that time the school has just started aerospace engineering, and there was one class that differentiated aerospace from aeronautics, which was the orbital mechanics class. So this is how long ago this was, and how we were in early stages of developing just the space programs, and even in universities. 30 years some later now, absolutely, we have robust, strong technical programs in various universities focused on space systems, developing, designing, operating those systems. We have business schools now that are starting to focus on space leadership. So we have executive MBA programs. So some of my colleagues have initiated those programs where we're talking about executive MBAs for space leadership, how to be a startup in a commercial space sector. What I would say we are not as hardly focus on is, again, on the policy making. And because things are moving so fast in this time of change, and every day there's some new technology that we use, space is also contributing to those changes in technology that we are quickly getting relying on and becoming dependent on. So policy making is not necessarily keeping up with it, and I think we do need to just kind of talk about it now. I think a part of your original question was, why am I talking about it from engineering? Is because I kind of had I was inclined to go into social sciences. This is something I had wanted to do and get my PhD in social science and policy making. So basically, I wanted to do space work, and I wanted to understand policy making. And so the two combined to me was NASA. So I basically was very fortunate to be a civil servant for several years at NASA headquarters. I joined NASA headquarters literally at the start of where NASA was starting to look at the commercial options for various for its missions. Space Shuttle program was about to retire, and we did not have a replacement human space vehicle to go to space station. And as you can imagine, politically it was not a good image for NASA. But what also happened was that NASA really took a bold move and said, okay, we need to start talking about what we call commercial off-the-shelf COTS vehicle to basically outsource the design and development of our new space transportation systems, along with NASA internally also developing similar systems. And that's when they went to the commercial sector and say, okay, we need to collaborate and partner with you. And there are all sorts of mechanisms that NASA creatively used to partner with the commercial sector to go there. And I was right there at headquarters talking about these things. And so as I did my PhD was in government outsourcing. I have been interested in what risk government takes when it outsources its risky programs. Like many of the space missions, NASA outsources majority of its work, and the funding goes to the defense contractors or space, basically to the space sector. And there it was is a different way of doing things. While we're contracting out, it wasn't really a contracting; it's really a partnership. And NASA calls them Space Act agreements. So these were the dynamics that I was right in the middle of, and I always say that I was there in the middle of sausage making and seeing all these things, changes happening in the agency, and so that's what inspired me. And why, long story short, now we are here talking about Introduction to Space Policy at Schar School.
Well, I think it's important too, because a lot of times academia has to catch up when things happen very quickly. You know, I talk to students and young people all the time about how you have to prepare for industries that haven't been invented and jobs that don't exist. And so how do you prepare? And to me, it's developing skill sets. You have to have skill sets that you can plug into these emerging industries. But academia also has to catch up, not just with the programs of study, but you have to educate the faculty members who teach in the programs of study, and identify what those programs of study need to include. And again, it's engineering, or it's business, or it's policy. It's all of these things that don't naturally fit together. So to me, this class, Introduction to Space Policy, is making an effort to look at the different elements that need to go into it, because we tend to work in silos. And I'm sure that's true in academia as it is everywhere else. You work in the silo to do the thing you were tasked to do. But this requires us to think far more comprehensively about all the players.
Yeah, so space ecosystem is pretty significant. Just for some numbers, we have the industry report come out, and there are various industry metrics that monitor and track the space economy, and basically specifically commercial space economy. And the 2024 reports have come out, and we basically in past 20 years have grown 6 times the size of this space economy. 2024 estimated that this space economy was about $600 billion, and it is projected to be about close to $2 trillion by 2040. So there are huge potentials, and a lot of that commercial growth. So when we think of space economy, we really are talking about 3 things. One is what we call scientific research. So these are your telescopes and all the planetary exploration that we do. That is there's the government spending that is devoted to those R&D efforts. Then we have what we call upstream economy, which is the goods and services that support and enable the space economy, which is launch vehicles, which are the satellites that provide some of the for Earth imaging, let's say Earth observation satellites, GPS satellites, position navigation, timing satellites, weather satellites. These are all the support systems, so they're called the upstream economy. And then we have the downstream economy. And the downstream economy is what you and I, whether we know it or not, are absolutely are part of, which is using all the navigation device in our tool, using the weather and Earth observation images for various industries. This goes to agriculture. This goes to, as the climate change is resulting in various natural disasters, be able to monitor real time those disasters and have emergency planning. These are all very crucial technologies and capabilities that we have access to now. And these are all enabled by the upstream economy plus now the downstream economy, and that's where the growth is. The most latest one, I would say, is the broadband access, so wireless internet around every corner of the world. That's the objective.
And that is something, that most viewers understand, broadband, and when we don't have it everywhere, like in Virginia or in the country. When we come back from our break, we are going to be talking with Dr. Hina Kazmi about space policy and why we all need to be paying attention to this. So please join us after this break.
Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably gonna turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
Probably okay isn't okay.
Right?
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him.
What's wrong with the world, mama? People living like they ain't got no mamas. I think the whole world's addicted to the drama, only attracted to things that'll bring the trauma. Yeah, madness is what you demonstrate, and that's exactly how anger works and operates. Man, you gotta have love just to set it straight. Take control of your mind and meditate. Let your soul gravitate to the love, y'all.
People killing, people dying, children hurt and you hear them crying. When you practice what you preach, but you turn the other
Ma'am,
cheek.
you forgot your purse.
Oh, you don't know how worried I was. Thank you very much.
Honesty. Pass it on.
Nice move, kid. Donut?
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Dr. Hina Kazmi. She is a professor at George Mason University, and she is about to roll out a brand new program this month, a course called Introduction to Space Policy. So when we went to the break, you were talking about the different components of how we need to think about space. Upstream, downstream, the investment of government, and we were talking about broadband. And let's help people understand a little bit more about how we have come to rely on commercial partners to deliver things we are all using right now.
Yeah, so it is actually, when we talk about space policy, there's a dichotomy in a sense. First, it is the decades of government investment in R&D and advancing satellite technologies, launch vehicle technologies, and really over the years we made it affordable to launch satellites. We made technology so advanced that we can have small, compact satellites, so small sats, so they're cheaper to launch. So the barriers to entry to this space ecosystem is a lot less now. So, and it is really credit to long-term government investments in mostly developed nations, primarily in the US. So having a strong industrial base, this is again decades of investment of taxpayers' dollars going into strengthening the industrial base, technological advancement. So that is an important contribution of the U.S. policies over the years and other advanced nations. So here we are, and now we have basically bearing the fruits of that investment, where we can get things for more efficient and cheaper. So. Wireless broadband access across the world with the constellations of LEO constellations, low Earth orbit telecom, small sat constellations like Starlink, Kuiper project with Amazon and OneWeb. These are essential tools that we need in our daily lives now. Living without wireless, without internet is really, it's
difficult.
It's difficult, but imagine many parts of the world don't have access to the internet, and it is so essential for economic development, for health, for just monitoring natural disasters in all the underdeveloped nations. So it is a very critical component to have that access. So yes, commercial space is really pioneering and helping us do that. So why I call the dichotomy is because first, yes, this is what we need, but the other side of the policy challenge then is that it's all happening so fast. I always equate where we are with the commercial space right now to the start of the internet age in the 90s. It happened, it almost feels like, if you look back, happened overnight. Before we knew it, we were reliant on the internet. We couldn't live without it. Before we knew it, we were reliant on our smartphones. We can't live without it. So the commercial space potentials are so dynamic and so profound for us that before we knew it, we're relying on it. Right now, since just 2019, we have about over 8,000 small satellites providing broadband internet access across the world. We will have as many as 40-some thousand in the next few years. That is an enormous amount of satellites orbiting around the Earth, and we are right away dependent on them. And so where the other side of this policymaking is that, how are we doing? Because up to now, government was really in charge of these systems that we depended on. So taxpayers paid for it. We could rely on the availability of the data and the cooperation, international cooperation, and sharing some of those space-based data. Once it becomes privatized and the commercial companies are owning these systems, that's where, frankly, we have to catch up and ensure the equity, the basic tenets of policymaking, right? Or lawmaking are transparency, equity, safety, security. Those are the pieces that we need to ensure are still in place while we absolutely want to promote it and grow the economic potentials of the space-based systems. And I think that's where we have to just catch up with the technology.
I would agree, because you've got private companies, 8,000 satellites, could be 40,000 satellites. That's a lot of satellite traffic. And so who decides
Yes.
who has access to it. We know, Elon Musk is the name everyone knows. Starlink is the the product that we know, but there's other players out there that maybe in the United States we don't know who they are. And so without policy or a compact or some convening body like the UN, for instance, to say that there has to be international agreements so that it is equitable and that we parcel out access or however that works in the future so that commercial entities all have, equal opportunity to have their product, their service be successful.
Yeah, so that is actually one area where up to now, right, before this huge growth of a commercial space sector, international law and international collaboration is really a model, because the nations have to work together to ensure that there's some without getting too technical, but to operate satellites you have to be within a radio frequency band, and there's an allocation process for these wavelengths, because we cannot talk, say two satellites, two different companies cannot talk over the same frequency band or we will override each other. So there are some necessary norms and rules and basically what I call rules of the game that international nation states have come together under the UN umbrella. So there are two important organizations, international organizations, that have worked really well over the decades. One is the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, and the other is International Telecommunication Union. ITU is really critical. It meets every 4 years. It has it's divided the world in 4 regions, where within regions countries negotiate terms of how they're going to split this radio frequency spectrum for their specific uses for various types of satellites and many other services. So wireless internet for one, even terrestrial-based services. So that's where they negotiate those terms. They come together every 4 years and they really hash out. So what they say is that these are limited resources, and so they negotiate how they will ensure equal access to these technologies for all nations, and that is the base underlying principles of the UN, these two UN bodies. So there are norms, but what we have to now think about is that we're growing so fast, and those norms are not necessarily very specific. They're not necessarily always legally binding, because and so we have to talk about property rights,
right? And intellectual property too.
Intellectual property, yes.
Right, because people are coming up with systems, as you said. There's the vehicles to get things into space, the upstream, and the downstream might be a pharmaceutical company that needs to build a lab in outer space, and they've got to use these other technologies that are run by these other companies in order to get their companies. So this is very complicated.
It's very complicated, even just talking about it. I mean, we could spend I'm teaching a whole class in this topic.
You're teaching a whole class because one of the things I can see right now, you have kind of like government relations people who lobby on behalf of their country, on their company, or whatever organization. You have lobbyists, and they go to state and local and the federal government, and they're like, I'm lobbying for this thing. But it seems to me we have a shortage of professionals with the expertise to do this in the space arena. So this class and this concept is basically looking to have students consider that this is a profession, an opportunity, a knowledge base of which there are not a lot of people right now capable of doing that kind of government relations.
Because it has over the decades, right? So when we think of space, we really are thinking very technically about it, right? We're thinking about engineers and scientists and space geeks or whatever. But it is, like I say, so prevalent, right? The space-based technologies that we use all the time are so prevalent that we just have to come to the table, and all the nations who maybe are underdeveloped but are more and more relying on Earth observation data, for example, how do we make sure that there's some representation for all nations? That's why 20 years ago, there were about 48 nations with dedicated space spending and space programs. Right now, just within 20 years, we have doubled the number of nations who have dedicated national space programs because they are seeing the reliance on space-based technologies like GPS, like weather and the broadband access and Earth observation data, and how much they need to make sure they have access to it because it's being more and more commercialized. UN, I'll just mention, has developed what they call Space for Sustainable Development Goals, where they're saying, okay, we need the space data for all nations to be able to monitor drought conditions, soil conditions, so we can predict, then nations can plan. It is a huge contributor in agriculture to monitor where, soil conditions, so whether you need to use fertilizer or not, it is making agriculture far more efficient. Energy resources, so by monitoring the Earth movement of different atmospheric conditions, and they can actually calibrate the grid based on the Earth observation data of efficient use of the energy. So the applications are so profound, and so they are definitely goals that UN is setting and saying, member states, we need to start thinking really, so there's a lot of activity going on, but they're not legally binding. These are goals and these are principles, and that's important to distinguish.
I think it is important because, again, compacts and collaboration, if there's no way to enforce it, then it really is a memorandum of understanding. It's an agreement, it's a compact, but everybody has to abide by the compact if there's no overarching way to enforce the agreement.
Yes.
I mean, to me, this is huge. This is
big stuff, and it's exciting and important stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, we're not even talking about AI, and we're not going to talk about AI. But I think one of the things that is accelerating this too is the mix of how much faster and farther this can go when you put AI tools in. And that is, again, Mason has its own new officer of artificial intelligence who is now overseeing for the university this particular aspect, and it's going to end up being part of almost every program, but we're still at the very, very beginning of that too. So as we talk about this, I think people need to understand the nascent, emerging nature of this, and also the fact that we're already there. We're already using it, and it's already going really, really fast.
Yeah.
So for you at home, please join us. We're only halfway through. We are talking with Dr. Hina Kazmi, and she is going to talk more about the course she is teaching on Introduction to Space Policy at George Mason University's Schar School. Join us after the break.
I can't believe we broke old man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See you, dude. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice. Homeless minds. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and I'm talking with Dr. Hina Kazmi. She is a professor at George Mason University Schar School, and she is rolling out a brand new course called Introduction to Space Policy. So when we went on our break, we were talking about some of the things that are already in place, but the speed at which we are moving into reliance on satellites and broadband and the things they produce, the infrastructure that they produce, and the fact that we need to catch up with policy. So let's talk a little bit about the policy framework. What do we have that exists, and where does it need to go?
So actually, one thing that we should, I know we talked about a lot about the economic potentials and the economic basically gains that we're getting in through commercial space ecosystem, but what we probably should talk about, and then we'll get to this policy framework, it will take us there, is the human space exploration part. So what is also being commercialized and different than what has been for past all the decades since the dawn of space age is that NASA has objectives and the international collaboration on Artemis Accords, which is basically that we are going back to the moon. We're going to establish colonies on the moon. We're going to establish base. We're going to live and work there. And that is our way of basically, it's our launch pad per se to go to Mars. So that is the idea behind going back to the moon and really setting our bases there. What is fascinating is that while the government is very much part of it and it's government-driven, some of the missions, both in the developed nations across U.S., the European Space Agency, Russia and China and India and many other states, there's a huge commercial component to it, which we have never had before. So we are now relying on lunar landers, space station and cislunar, which are really being developed commercially. And so that is a new factor also. And so that is another layer of space economy, which is not something and on a daily basis you and I are going to touch, but it is a huge, human space exploration is a huge component of a space ecosystem, which is also commercial partners are really working with government and nation states to do that. So given all of this activity and that is projected to be nearly $2 trillion in a few years, economic incentives are there, they're humongous. And so the policy framework that has existed and still exists is really based on when government drove these missions, the priorities, the funding, and the R&D investments. So that's what the framework is right now. I want to say National Space Council, for example, we basically it was disbanded in 1993. It is really at the executive level because early in the days of this, in the space age, we realized that we needed to have these conversations at the executive level. The first Trump administration revived the National Space Council, realizing the activity, commercial space activity that are going on. And so that is one framework where basically it is led by the vice president. So Biden administration continued it, and it will now continue because space is such a presence and important sector to be discussing in the policymaking arena. So vice president typically leads that council. It meets every year, and where they really talk about national priorities. How do we make sure the U.S. has been the leader in space exploration and remains the leader. So that includes in the strong industrial base, sustaining that. National security is a huge component of this of our modern space age, and all the capabilities for national securities that are being developed across nations. So that is a good, important framework. And then I mentioned already the 2 UN bodies where there's a lot of important discussions happen there. But again, what I would say is that, so those frameworks exist. but they are, again, based on that old, what you would call the original space age or the older model, and now we're in a whole different place, and that's why there has been conversations that the NSC, should it be really led by the Department of Commerce, because DOC by definition, their job, their focus, mission focus is to promote economic growth and industrial base. So for the U.S. to stay a leader, should it be really a DOC who should be making sure an NSC is run smoothly and in the interest of economic growth? And then there are academia people and space geeks like me who say, well, that is absolutely true, but we also need to then talk about those other tenets in this commercial space sector, because up to now, a lot of the space data or going to the moon and colonizing the moon, we haven't even talked about property laws, and these terms are not really explicit right now in the UN even agreements. So there's just a lot of definitions that necessarily don't fit the times, and that's where I think we need to have really important discussions about, okay, for example, I mean, I can go on and on about this, but for example, you know, what the scholars are saying that, hey, do we need to think about space as under commons law? Because we really are not, meaning just like over the centuries, really, we have talked about the oceans. Not every country doesn't own all the ocean. Yes, we have our shores, but then there's the international territories. So space being so valuable, going to the moon, it's establishing our colonies with different nation states sponsoring them, and commercial activities. And will there be conflicts of property rights, or should there be any property rights? Because the moon is the planet. So we're talking about, so these are the scholars who are talking about commons law, that, hey, space needs to fall under commons law, so nobody owns the assets in space because we're so heavily dependent on it. And so these are the important conversations. And what I will also say is that, you know, I've been living and breathing space for 30-some years. I've grown up my career in this. And so what I do see is colleagues, my colleagues and other folks like me really getting into these discussions. And what I'm hoping, and introducing this class, is that let's open up this dialogue with the wider audience, right? So right now we have a lot of consulting firms who do these space economic indexes and estimates and projections for the commercial space economy, and this is all good. This is, you know, this is what we prioritize. But beyond the economics, we need to just kind of step back and say, okay, you know, is there something we're missing? I mean, for example, as the internet boom happened, right, we had to catch up with privacy laws. And cybersecurity. So is there any, what are we missing? And we need diverse perspective on that.
So, you know, for those of us who remember the Apollo program, and Sputnik, Sputnik was a little before my time, but this is sort of the framework. There was a space race, you know, and governments invested in wanting to be the first into outer space. And for many reasons, some having to do with security and military, but also having to do with commerce, which is, but the old framework of nation states is you plant a flag on it and call it yours. I mean, the world was settled by colonization. You're talking about colonies on the moon, like we're going to colonize the moon, and yet the whole history of the Earth has been about colonization too, and people row up to the shore, plant a flag, and call it theirs. And so it seems to me we're, as a species, a little more evolved to realize that this is probably not the best way to go about this.
That's really interesting you said that, because that is exactly the terminology is even, okay, well, colonization has really, can have very dark meaning for many, many nations, right? So many people around the globe. So you're absolutely right. So even those terminologies matter, because what process, what policy thinking they may bring with them, given our history, human history, basically. So you're absolutely right. So I think these are all the diverse viewpoints, and you know, again, I say, you know, space geeks and engineers like me are not always thinking in those diverse ways. But that is what we need, and that is why we should be just having these conversations, because there are things that I know I haven't thought of all the issues, and nor do I absolutely have answers to these policy changes. But I do know that we are really at the cusp of becoming interplanetary species. We really are. Now, I would love to see in my lifetime that we first person lands on Mars, but I hope also, which I'm not sure if that will happen, but I do hope in my lifetime I get to see the first lunar base, really, and that's exciting stuff, but along with it is some policy responsibilities.
So a significant development was the International Space Station. Like, you can't talk about the arc of space without talking about how that came about and how it is operating now. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration there.
Oh, yes, yes. Actually, I tout International Space Station as perhaps the finest example of international partnership and collaboration and R&D. I mean, Space Station, when it was first being designed and developed, like many challenging missions like the ISS, was over budget, late, political mess, really. And I remember I was in college in those days when it had to be redesigned. The budget went 4 times the earlier estimates. It was just, but over the years, now 30 years later, since the space station started getting integrated on orbit, it has paid dividends in terms of all the research we've done living for long term in space, and how does body react to that, so we can be prepared to actually live in space on lunar base or cislunar orbits space stations. These are all the decades of investment that we made in R&D. And when I say we're really talking about across nations, internationally. The US has always taken a lead in these investments. The US space budget has been greater, the civil and defense combined budget has been far greater than the rest of the nations combined. But we have done, like I said, how to live long-term in microgravity environment, pharmaceutical, that is something on the horizon. We have learned how to actually make drugs more efficient in microgravity environment, and pharmaceuticals have paid attention and they want to tap into it. So they want to use space stations to go and develop these, because they can build them cheap, faster, and they're more effective. So there's a whole host of
So when we talk about this, what we're basically saying is we've got to take everything that we figured out how to do on Earth and figure out how to do it in space, and to do it in a sustainable way, in a responsible way, because one of the things we haven't talked about is space junk. Like, where do satellites go to die? I don't know. I don't think any of our viewers know where do satellites go to die. Don't know. So join us after this break. I am talking to Dr. Hina Kazmi, who is teaching a course at George Mason University on Introduction to Space Policy, and this is something all of us need to pay attention to. So please join us after this break.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are talking with Dr. Hina Kazmi, who is teaching a course called Introduction to Space Policy at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. And when we went to our break, we were talking about space junk and who is in charge of that, because environmental sustainability is also something that we're trying to create policies around here on this planet, but we have to think about what that looks like when there are things floating around in outer space.
And thankfully, people are thinking about it and talking about it. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of concerns on space debris. So I would say it's been slow, right? So more assets we put in Earth's orbit, especially low Earth orbit, more we have concerns about interference, debris falling back on Earth, and how do we control that? So there are absolutely concerns about that. Now, there are, like I mentioned already, the international bodies, the UN bodies have, these things have been, so you have to have a descent rules about, okay, either you, what we call it, orbit raising. So depending on the type of satellite you have, you can push it out in the space so it doesn't fall back on Earth, but low Earth orbit satellites basically are designed to fall back, and they basically burn up in the upper atmosphere, so they don't survive, and that's really how we control this. The orbital debris. Now, of course, more air assets we have in space, more satellites we launch in low Earth orbit, is going to get crowded, and people are paying attention to that. There's a whole air traffic management system that NASA and along with other civil agency and DoD have started putting together. Okay, we need to have almost air traffic management, like the airplane traffic management rules of the for managing our low Earth orbit satellite traffic. And so there are a lot of conversation. I cannot tell you that we have it yet, especially if we are going to really launch 40-some thousand satellites. Are we going to be able to manage this debris? Because what happens with the space debris is that it's moving really fast. So if you have collision between two satellites, it generates thousands of pieces of debris, and at the speeds that it moves, it can just damage more assets on orbit and create more debris. So it's just an exponential effect. So there is a concern. We're not. I will say this, and I'll probably my colleagues will reach out to me. It is not essential today, but it is definitely coming up. It is something we have to talk about, and agencies and nations are absolutely aware of it and talking about it. How do we make sure we don't have that? But to answer your original question, a lot of the low Earth orbit satellites, they're small and they burn up in upper atmosphere, so they don't fall on our head. Now, space station type, Mir space station, if you remember, it was a controlled re-entry, and it was designed and controlled to it fell in the middle of the ocean. So there are rules about that for sure. Yeah.
So just like air traffic controllers, because that was kind of like, so airports around the world, the airplanes take off every day, all day, but there's common codes and structure and language and rules, and everybody agrees to follow them. If you're operating an airport and you're operating an airline, then everyone agrees. And is that what we're kind of looking for with satellites and anything else that goes into space?
Space traffic management, satellite traffic management is absolutely a pivotal topic right now. And guess what? With the air traffic management, the FAA, the United States, took the lead. Always the standards that the world uses really are been established by the United States. So of course, we want to see that happen again. So there are nations talking about it, and one of the policy, when we talk about domestic policy, is that is the U.S. to ensure that our standards, our norms, and our expertise adopted, right? So of course there's that. So that is absolutely the fact. I cannot tell you that we have it down, but absolutely, given the concern of increased number of satellites in low Earth orbit, concerns about collisions and creating more debris, because one thing, as we move more and more, as we are more and more dependent on space-based technologies, like the Earth observation data for energy management, for emergency natural disaster management and planning for those, agriculture I mentioned earlier, navigation tools that we all rely on for all sorts of online business transaction. As we are more and more reliant on these technologies, it is really prevalent that we don't have those kind of accident and collision, because these technologies are considered critical infrastructure. And critical infrastructure, there are norms between nation states, how to protect those, and that's really what we're talking about. So yes, space satellite, or I think it's called space traffic management, don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Is definitely something that is part of the policy discussion, yeah.
You know, as we are looking at extreme weather situations here on Earth, you know, you brought it up, managing weather events, hurricanes, flooding, we've seen it, the extreme temperatures, just extreme weather events, and this impacts agriculture along with a lot of other things. And so you have brought up a couple of times agriculture and space, where you can, one assumes, control the environment so you don't have, I don't know, spotted lanternflies and other kinds of things in your controlled environment, things that we can't control here on Earth. But again, you know, from an equity standpoint, who gets to build, you know, outer space farms? You know, how do we make this equitable?
Well, I think when I talk about agriculture energy, I'm really talking about the Earth observation data. So be able to monitor soil conditions, drought conditions, and plan for those, right? Those are that is the valuable information we get from various sensors who measure all these moisture content and deforestation. We can even, you know, Earth observation data educates us on all sorts of atmospheric, geological, oceanic, and biodiversity. I mean, it really brings all those pieces together for our and the earth sciences satellites and help us deal with a lot of those challenges. So that is something where the equity and access to that data comes from, and where, if they're commercially owned system, how do we make sure they're publicly accessible? Because when government funded those missions, they are publicly accessible. That is an agreement that nations have made, and because they're paid by taxpayers' dollars. Right. And so now that's the conversation, access to that data and equity in that sense, where nation states are saying, hey, I want to have a space program, and I want to make sure I have a seat at the table to have these policy discussions. Where you were talking about
putting something out in space or on the moon. If we're going to colonize the moon, are we going to have some sort of different kind of agriculture? And who would that be accessible to?
We better have something to feed the astronauts.
I think we better have something to feed people, but the things that we can't really control on Earth, even with data, access to data, we can't control disease, and there's just a lot of things we can't control or haven't figured out. Maybe we haven't figured out how to do it.
Yes.
But if we can figure out how to do things better in space, then who gets the opportunities to do that? You know, again, because it's a commercial economic driver. I mean, people are making money doing this.
Money doing it, as far as the, let's say, the lunar base settlements and really working, being interplanetary species. For the foreseeable future, government is going to be pretty much part of it, because they are not quite yet economic potentials there. So you and I cannot, well, maybe you can, I cannot afford to pay the, you know, a few $100,000 to take even a suborbital flight right now. But the point is that there isn't an economic potential. So government, nation states are absolutely involved in setting those lunar bases. That's why that space race is really to the moon is between all the developed nations, China, US, and and Europe and Russia, that we're all going to build our own little colonies. So that is the factor there. Now, the rules of the road once we get there, and that's where the discussion, like I already mentioned, is about property laws. Can we really have territories? Can we carve out, say this is, can we draw borders on moon, which will, personally, I think it would be really sad if we take our politics and our divisions to the moon. And again, thus the need to have a public policy discourse, because should we take those same politics to the moon? I mean, can we have a different way of working together? I also wanted to just bring up on this sustainability question that you asked. One thing that is kind of maybe somewhat in the background, unless you're an astronomer or astrophysicist, with the prevalence of all the low Earth orbit satellite constellations, it is actually directly impacting radio astronomy and just regular astronomy from ground-based telescopes, because what happens is, as you're observing the sky, the light streaks go by, and so now you have this polluted data or corrupted data that the astronomers have to calibrate for. Now, given the thousands of satellites that we anticipate to have in low Earth orbit, it is actually a really challenge. It's impacting the astronomy, for the ground-based telescopes. There's a change happening here, and that we're all slowly seeing and starting to adapt. Again, it's happening so fast that we're catching up in all these various aspects, scientific research in astronomy, and how do we now kind of control this growth. And I also wanted to say that, you know, to address some of these things, you know, there are cultural aspects to this. You know, we have for centuries have looked into the, you know, thousands of years, looked in the sky and imagined, you know, what the cosmos has looked like, and here we are really talking about these commercial space activities in a real way. You know, it's called World Monuments Fund. They just last year identified the moon as what they call it, as a moon base, a heritage site, especially the Tranquility Base, where we have the footprint of Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, right? So these are the things, so people are actively working on protecting these sites. So, hey, don't mess with these are important historical heritage sites. So there's cultural aspect coming into play with the growth of the space economy.
Well, as we come to the close of this fascinating show, I just want to, first of all, thank you for being on here and sharing this with us. And I also want to encourage people to look up your class, because registration is not closed. And this is a special course. So this is not part of a core curriculum. No. It is an elective. And so people from any discipline at the university can take this course.
Yes.
And so I would encourage people to sign up for the course, and based on popularity and demand, this course may be repeated in the future, but no guarantee. So again, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Hina Kazmi, for being on the show, for making us all a little bit smarter about what we should be concerned about when it comes to the future of outer space. Thanks for joining us.